Good morning, everyone. My name is Diana Shulak. I am here with Family Focus Resource Center. I work at our Cal State University Northridge office, but Family Focus Resource Center also has 3 other offices located in the lobbies of the North LA County Regional Center in Antelope Valley, Santa Clarita Valley, and Chatsworth. Today, we are here with the Antelope Valley SELPA with Stacy, Alvey, and Monika Gylys. They're going to be presenting navigating challenges with your child's IEP. I did want to let you know, again, this workshop is being recorded so that we can post this on our YouTube channel if you'd like to watch it later or share it with somebody who may be interested in this workshop. You can definitely share it. We will be sending out within a week these slides. So you will be receiving the slides as well as a short survey from Family Focus Resource Center, just asking what you thought of the workshop and maybe some ideas for future workshops. We would really appreciate your input. And also with the link to the YouTube recording, which again should be up within this week. So right now, again, we do have the interpretation. We will be doing question and answer period at the end. And when we do the question and answers, we do pause the recording. So none of your questions will be recorded. If you do feel like during the presentation, you want to go ahead and put your question in the chat, feel free to do so, but we won't be addressing it until the question and answer period. But that way, if you don't want to make sure you don't forget it, you're more than welcome to put your question in the chat. That also does not show on the recording. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to these lovely ladies who are going to be presenting for us today. We really appreciate you guys being here, Stacy and Monika. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us here. This is something that we love to do for our community. And we just also want to stress that we're going to be talking about specifically what we do in the Antelope Valley, our process as far as alternate dispute resolution and how we kind of navigate our IEPs. So it might be done a little bit differently in Santa Clarita Valley SELPA or in Chatsworth. However, again, we are here representing the Antelope Valley SELPA. And again, we're so happy that you have extended the invitation that we can share some of what our SELPA does with you so that you as parents can become active parts of the IEP, and so you can understand how to navigate any sort of challenges you may be experiencing, just to prepare yourself to be a good advocate for your child, and really how this relationship between families and the school districts, how important it is to just work towards coming up with effective solutions for the sake of the child. So we're gonna just jump into it. Stacy, are you going to be sharing screen? Okay. So maybe we'll just start with introductions. My name is Monika Gylys, and I'm the program specialist for the Antelope Valley SELPA. I have been in this position for 11 years now, almost going on my 12th year. My background is in special education and in speech pathology. I've worn a number of different hats, and I absolutely love working with the families and the community in the Antelope Valley. Stacy, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Stacy Alvey. I'm a mental health coordinator here at the Antelope Valley SELPA, and I've been here about the same length of time as Monika. My background is as a licensed clinical social worker and as a school psychologist. So again, we're so happy that we have an opportunity to talk to you about what to do when you're having issues with the school district and how to navigate the problems that you're having in a way that's really going to benefit your child. We're really passionate about this work and grateful for the opportunity to be here.
Great. So Stacy's sharing the screen, and I hope you can all see the screen here. So yes, we are going to just be talking about we're going to orient you first to special education. And then we're going to get through some tips and strategies and maybe a global understanding of how you might navigate some challenges with your child's IEP. Okay, so if we go to the next. So we're going to be talking about the special education process first. We'll talk a little bit about conflict and the benefits of conflict. And then we're going to talk about what our SELPA does when all of our efforts don't result in acceptable agreements. We're going to talk a little bit about the federal law. We're also going to give you some tips of how you can prepare for your child's IEP meeting so that the meetings are more understandable and more accessible. Everyone's coming to the meeting with their own unique perspective of situations, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges and benefits that can come from these different perspectives that we bring to these meetings. Again, I hope we have a lot of questions, but save them to the end and we will make sure to address all your questions. But again, if you do want to throw something in the chat just so you don't forget it, you're welcome to do that as well. Okay, next. So again, we are going to talk a little bit about IDEA. So the Individuals with Disability Education Act, that's IDEA, is the law that makes available a free and appropriate public education. So in the world of special education, I'm sure you already know all of those wonderful acronyms, right? And so when we talk about FAPE, which is an often used acronym, it means Free Appropriate Public Education. And again, IDEA is the law that means the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So it makes sure that a free and appropriate public education is available to children with disabilities throughout the nation. And it makes sure that the special education related services are provided to those students. The IDEA governs how states and public agencies provide early intervention services, any sort of specialized academic instruction, and any other related services that the student might need. And I think we in the United States, this impacts 7.5 million eligible infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities.
Monica, maybe I'll just add too that IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is federal law. So it's the federal law that governs all of this.
Okay, so recently too, in 2017, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a unanimous opinion in the case of Andrew versus Douglas County School District in Colorado. In this case, the court interpreted the scope of the free, appropriate public education requirements in IDEA. And the Supreme Court had determined that to meet its substantive obligation under the law, IDEA, a school must offer an IEP that is reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstances. And then the court additionally emphasized that the requirement that every child should have the chance to meet challenging objectives. So, people are like, well, what does this reasonably calculated mean? And generally, this means that school personnel are going to make decisions that are informed by their own expertise, the progress of the child's potential for the growth, and the views of the child's parents, okay? So the IEP team members should consider how special education and related services, if any, have been provided to the child in the past, including the effectiveness of specific instructional strategies and supports and services with the student. And then the court also stated that any review of an IEP must consider whether the IEP is reasonably calculated to ensure such progress, not whether it would be considered ideal. So we're really looking at a student making progress. And on the bottom there, we have a link that provides you with some more information about this big Supreme Court decision that was, again, it was brought to us in 2017. So since 2017, we've been doing a lot to make sure that we are showing that a child is making progress. Stacy, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just thinking, and Monica, you and I have talked about this before, how if we think about this as parents, you want the absolute best for your child. Of course, we're parents too, and we want the best for our children. And what the law is saying is that school districts are not obligated to provide the best for any child, whether they're a child in general education or a child that has an IEP, that school districts have a legal obligation to help the child make some reasonable progress, but they're not obligated to provide the best case scenario for your child. So that's automatically kind of a setup for conflict, right? As parents, you want the best. School districts don't have a legal requirement to do that. So that already creates a challenge for us all.
Okay, so another key component of IDEA, of this law, is known as the least restrictive environment. And again, that's LRE. And FAPE, again, is free and appropriate public education. So, this component is the least restrictive environment. And so the law doesn't really define what the least restrictive environment is in its definition sections. But it does require that each student receive special education and related services in the least restrictive environment, and describes what this means. So let's take a look at the cited law to develop a better understanding what's meant. So it requires that each student receives special education and related services in the least restrictive environment. Stacy, are we going to be, it's in the next slide? Okay, there
Well,
it is.
I think the important thing is, first thing I just want to say, this is the most boring part of the presentation. We're giving you the law and legal definitions, and I know this can be a little challenging, but we want to make sure that parents know what the law that educators are working under. So here are the requirements for the least restrictive environment.
Okay, so it is telling us that to the maximum extent appropriate, students with disabilities, including kids in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are non-disabled. That means our students that are receiving general education. And that special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular education environment only occurs if the nature and severity of the disability is such that education and regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services can't be achieved satisfactorily. And a really big part of this is making sure that families understand that it is our duty to make sure that we really consider all of the different possible placements. And when we start talking about, we have our IEP meeting, and we're talking about where your student will be, or where the child or where the student will be receiving most of their services, we always talk about in the least restrictive environment. So we'll talk about how can we, is it possible, how is it possible for this child to be educated within the general education setting? And then as the student has more and more needs, then it becomes a little bit more restrictive. A lot more services might be added, more time might be added. There might be more time taken away from the general education setting. And sometimes there's even those situations when the student really does need a lot more support, and they might be spending the majority of their day in more of a specialized setting. And so when we understand this whole portion of the law, parents and community members can really understand why educators might be a little bit more cautious and careful about removing or limiting the removal of a student with disabilities from the general education classroom. It's very important to us that we make sure that our students have as much time possible with their general education peers. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Not only is it a part of the law, but oftentimes it's really what's best for the student, for them to be educated with their peers, for them to learn from models. And so, if we have conversations within the IEP meeting about really taking a look at all the different possible settings and the whole entire spectrum, this is why it is even our state government in California is constantly making sure that we are providing as much education as possible within the general education setting. Stacy, you want to add anything?
Sure. I'm thinking about how every year the state receives the data for all students that have IEPs, and they're taking a look to see how much time they're spending within the general education setting. And each of the school districts have to meet certain targets that are set out by the state following federal law. So if you have a school district who's really trying to encourage your child to spend more time with non-disabled peers, this is something that's being considered. They're trying to align with the federal law and with state requirements.
So when we talk about a team and when we talk about the IEP team meeting, it's really making sure that all sorts of facets are being covered here, right? And so when we write an effective IEP for a child with a disability, the team is going to include parents, teachers, and any other school staff or related services to come together closely to really take a look at all the students' needs. Oftentimes, the student will also be included in this meeting, and that's something that we hope all of our districts are encouraging. Okay, so it takes all of these different team members with each of their own perspectives of the students and their needs and their expertises to develop an effective IEP. And parents, families, you have so much knowledge to contribute, so much experience to contribute to the IEP meetings. It's so important that you participate and share because yes, you know, we may have the expertise as far as education, but you definitely have the expertise when it comes to your child and knowing your child and how they are at home, and also talking about what your hopes and dreams might be for the child. So all of these individuals come together, they share their knowledge, their expertise, including families and parents and caregivers, and they commit to design this educational program, right? And when you design the program, we also say it's really important for parents to even understand what all the goals are and what all the needs are, because the more people that can work on a goal and understand what the needs are, the more likely it is that the child will actually make that progress. And so we we design this educational program together, and we, you know, have progress monitoring, we share the progress, and again, we have to make sure that it's aligned to the general education curriculum. And we are really hoping that the student is spending the majority of their time in the general education curriculum. If not, then in the specialized setting, that general education, that the curriculum is being aligned with what's happening in the general education setting. Stacy, anything else?
Well, I'm just thinking before we move on to how the process works, I just want to reiterate what Monika is saying, that parents are so essential and so important to the process that I think in the law, the term parent is mentioned more than something like 230 times, right? Parents are so essential to the process. But parents don't always see things the same way educators see things. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how do we come together and work collaboratively as a team, not against each other, because that's what's in the best interest of the student. So Monika, why don't we talk about how the process works then?
Okay. So, and you may already know or be within the process. You may have already gone through the process, but we just want to make sure that we all have an understanding of really what the legal process is here. So we have this chart that we've created, and again, we'll be sending you the PowerPoint so you can take a look at this. It offers an overview of the whole special education process. And it's not designed to show all the small steps or specific details, but just kind of the whole overview. It shows what happens from the time the child's referred for evaluation and is identified as having a disability through the development of this IEP, the creating the IEP and reviewing it, and, you know, sharing progress. And so the process begins when someone, so either school staff or parents, make a referral for an initial evaluation. Okay, so the district must respond within 15 days of the referral or written request. Okay, so they'll go through the evaluation and the IEP team, which includes the parents. They'll have the evaluation. You may be asked to fill out some forms. They might interview you. So after you have that initial evaluation, the team comes together and they determine if the student's eligible for special education based on all the information from the evaluations. Okay. And once the student's been found eligible for special education, the team, which again includes parents, they're going to develop the IEP. And that addresses all the students' identified academic needs. And again, how do they know what their needs are? They've gone through this evaluation. And the evaluation process is going to come up with a list of, if this child is eligible, of all of what their needs are. What is it that they need to have some more specialized instruction so that they can gain access to the general education curriculum. Okay, so the team is going to come together, they're going to develop this IEP, and they're going to address all the students' identified needs. Okay, and then what happens is they will also talk about they'll talk about the different goals. They'll talk about services required to support the student in meeting those goals. So they might determine that, oh, the child also might need speech services and to help them reach their goals. They might need to work with an occupational therapist, but there's a variety of people that are on the team based on the student's needs that will contribute towards this meeting and towards the plan, the development of the plan. Okay, and so the child's eligible, they have the goals, they have the services. We all sign off after that first IEP meeting, the initial IEP meeting. And then every year, the IEP is going to be reviewed at least annually, right? And they review the progress towards the goals. They're going to develop every year until they are no longer needed. Or in some cases, it might be those goals you might be having an IEP for the child's entire career based on the needs. But they'll review the progress towards those goals, and they're going to then develop any sort of new goals for the upcoming year, right? And then every 3 years, the student will be reassessed so that we can determine if the child is continuously eligible for special education. Okay, so every 3 years, there will be the eligibility evaluation. Sometimes you might hear them say triennial. And that's in order to determine whether or not the student continues to be found eligible for special education. And the other thing that we want to make sure that you know is that parents can request a meeting at any time. And the district has 30 days to hold the meeting. Okay. And I want to go back to, again, the purpose of the IEP meeting is really for our IEP team, which includes families and students, if appropriate, to work collaboratively to identify all of the needs, the special education services, and then the supports that are going to be delivered for the students, again, based on all of the identified needs. This process produces this written record, right, the IEP itself, which formalizes these services and supports. At the end of a meeting, you're going to be asked to sign an agreement, or if you don't agree, then we'll need to have some additional meetings. The student services will not start until there is agreement, until parents have signed an agreement, right? So the IEP meeting, we usually have, we ask that there's a facilitator sometimes, or there's an administrator or even the case manager that facilitates the meeting to make sure that everyone is engaged in this discussion, right? And then the facilitator also makes sure that we discuss and plan all of the different IEP components, necessary components. Okay.
And so we'll talk about that in just a little bit, what exactly that looks like. I do want to say that this process that Monika has been describing to you is all outlined in federal law. So this process is going to be the same whether you have a child that's attending in Los Angeles Unified School District, in the Santa Clarita Valley SELPA, within our SELPA. Okay, for those of you that are just joining on, we work here for the Antelope Valley SELPA, the special education office here that supports all 10 school districts. The other thing I just wanted to mention really briefly as well is that legally, yes, parents can call for an IEP meeting at any time. You don't have to wait for the annual meeting, just like Monika said. But sometimes there are issues that don't require the entire team to be assembled. And sometimes it just could be a meeting that's with you and the administrator, or you, the administrator, and the teacher. And sometimes that meeting can be facilitated with, like in our SELPA, I will go in and help coordinate that meeting. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But it just doesn't always have to be a formal IEP meeting to address every single issue.
Okay, so there sometimes is conflict, right? And within all IEP meetings, when you have people coming from different perspectives, we're all coming from a different angle, right? And so conflict happens. But we're going to talk a little bit more about conflict and then the benefits of collaboration and trying to figure out how we can collaborate for the benefit of the student. Okay. So although the law intends to bring the experts together to create this educational program that's unique to the students' needs, sometimes, again, like I said, we're coming from different perspectives and we don't always see eye to eye, but we might not be sure how to address the differing opinions and the what's in this child's interests.
And again, you are an expert too, right? When we say expert, we're not just talking about school staff. You are an expert in your child as well. Your child's first teacher, your child's most important teacher. Okay. So here, I don't know if any of you have ever heard this story about the 6 blind men in India who all wanted to be able to experience an elephant. They had heard about an elephant, but they didn't know what that meant. And because they all did not have vision, they weren't able to visualize what that meant. So as the story goes, they had an opportunity to be with the elephant, but each one of the men experienced the elephant differently. So one of the men experienced the elephant's trunk, and he said, "Oh, an elephant is like a snake." Another one of the men said, experienced the elephant's big, sturdy leg and said, "Oh, I understand an elephant. It's just like a tree." Another one of the men experienced only the elephant's ear, and they said, "Oh, an elephant is like a very big fan." Another one of the men experienced the elephant's tail and said, "Oh, an elephant is a rope. That's what it is, a rope." And the last gentleman experienced the elephant and said, he experienced the elephant's tusk. And he said, "I see now, an elephant is like a spear." So each one of them, based on their own unique and personal experience of a part of the elephant, thought that they knew exactly what the elephant was, when really it took all of their collective experiences to truly come together and understand what an elephant was. And sometimes this is what happens in IEP meetings. We have a limited perspective and experience of a child. Maybe the teacher only has limited experience of the child in their classroom. Maybe the school psychologist had limited experience with the child based on what they saw during the assessment portion. You as a parent have limited experience of the child in your home and in the community environment because you're not there in the school every day and in the classroom, right? So everybody has their own unique experience and perspective. And that's what the law intends, is to bring the room together of all these experts who have expertise in one area of that child's life and intends for them to come together and have a conversation and learn from each other and listen to each other and develop some trust in each other in order to form the entire picture and the full perspective in order to develop an appropriate program.
That's a great story. And here are just some other viewpoints here. So we have these images, and if you take a look at these images, they kind of serve as a good reminder to pause, listen, and to consider the perspective of others. Just because you don't agree doesn't mean someone else is wrong. And this can be kind of hard when we think we're being challenged or we feel that we're being told we're wrong. But we are much stronger when we work together. And this means being open-minded to others' opinions and their views and their expertise. And this is true for all team members, right? So if you see the first one here, reality can be so complex that equally valid observations from differing perspectives can appear to be contradictory, right? And who's right? They're both right. They're just looking at it from different perspectives. And the second image, it's again, you have one number. And just because you're right doesn't mean I'm wrong. You just haven't seen life from my side. So it's really important to be curious. And we try to teach all of our staff members and the different districts to come to this meeting and come to when we have conflict or when we have disagreements, that we really understand that power of this collective perspective of really taking a look at everyone's perspective and being curious and asking about it and being open. So I love these. These two are just really great reminders of how, almost everyone is right here. It's just they all have a different perspective. Okay. So let's get back to IDEA. So the Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act requires that parents be afforded a legitimate, authentic opportunity to participate in the decision-making process for their children and should be encouraged to be active participants. And Stacy was saying
I was wrong. I was wrong.
It's appear over the word parents and parentally appear over 350 times in the law. But in reality, oftentimes parents don't feel authentically included. And there are teachers that might see parents as hindering their ability to do their jobs, right? And we talked and we hear parents and we have meetings with parents where they say they don't feel authentically included, right? And they're just like, well, I don't know how I fit into this. Or it doesn't seem like I don't understand what they're saying. Or I don't have the expertise. Or they just don't feel like they are included. And what we've been doing at the Antelope Valley SELPA is we've really been trying for the past 7 years to bring a new understanding, a culture shift to our IEP meetings, making sure that we're really making sure that our districts are trying to bring parents and school districts together, right? And embracing those different perspectives, being curious. And instead of fearing conflict, which is a natural part of working collaboratively, we do need to understand that there are benefits to having and utilizing different perspectives so that we can come up with a student, okay? And that's a problem that I think when you talk to people who have had IEPs or have been working in special education for a long time, oftentimes when you say IEP meeting, it immediately creates a little bit of sense of discomfort because we are trying to collaborate and work together. But what I'm really hoping that as we do training for our different districts and as we work with our different schools, that our teachers do a better job and our districts do a better job of making sure that parents feel authentically included, that they are truly a part of a team, and that we do need to work collaboratively for our students to make progress. All right. So like the ocean, conflict can feel like changing tides that are smooth sailing, stormy, or somewhere in between. So we're gonna move this to Stacy. Stacy, you're gonna take over?
Do you want me to start here? Okay. Yeah, conflict can be really challenging. And like we said in the beginning, the law actually has an unintended consequence of creating conflict. That was not the legislature's intention when they developed IDEA. But here we have parents who want the best for their child. We have school districts who are not required to provide the very best for any child. They're required to provide what's reasonable. And so that's already kind of a setup for conflict right from the very beginning, right? But this is the good news. There's actually some benefits that can come from conflict. And that's one of the things we want to talk about today. So conflict and not seeing eye to eye, having different perspectives and different opinions can actually help bring out some new ideas. It can help the IEP team get a little creative, where they start to think about unique ways to help this child's needs get met, okay? It can bring about a new awareness of the problems. Maybe as a parent, maybe you didn't realize some of the problems that were happening for your child in the educational setting. Or maybe for the educators, they have an opportunity to learn about some of the things you're experiencing at home that they were not aware of, okay? This means that we have to be open, and instead of shutting down when there's conflict, we have to be willing to be a little bit more vulnerable and to open up and to have hard conversations. And as Monika said, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, what we're doing to help it be a safer place to have those conversations. So conflict can lead to better solutions. It can actually lead to better practices and improved processes. Okay, so sometimes we don't really pause and take a look at what we can improve until we hear from somebody, either a parent or an educator, that, hey, you know what, this isn't really working. And then we have to pause and take a look and say, okay, what do we need to do differently? And that actually can improve systems for everybody. It can open up more possibilities, and it can build a commitment to work better together. Okay, and this is what we're hoping for. Rather than the increasing divide, maybe you're here in the Antelope Valley and maybe you're on social media and you see all the negativity that's floating around and the contention and the conflict and the complaints about the school districts. And I'm not saying that many of those aren't warranted, but is it really helpful? Do we want to be part of tearing things down and tearing things apart, or do we want to be part of seeing something differently and working better together and improving the system? Okay, so that's what we're really talking about. So
if I could just also, again, if I can just add something to that.
Yeah, you bet.
I think one of the best things is that one of the ideas we really want to impart is that let's all try to be solution finders. Let's all try to work together to come up with a solution rather than, really dragging everything down. I think we all have to work as a team. I think education has changed quite a bit. And again, more people that come together and work together to come up with solutions, the better the outcome is for the student and for education in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just be real. I mean, we're in California. It's the most litigious state in the nation, right? Everybody thinks you need to get an advocate and an attorney for everything. And we're not saying advocates are unimportant and attorneys are bad. Sometimes advocates and attorneys are needed. But typically, and we'll get into it, but typically that really slows the process down. It can hinder change, and it can really stretch out the length of time before students can get what they need. It's really, in many, many cases, not the best option. So let's just talk a little bit about what parents can do. We probably have parents and maybe some community members here. We might have some educators here. I'm not exactly sure everybody's background, but let's just talk a little bit about the tips for working with school staff. And we're going to share just like Monika alluded to, some of the things that we've been working very hard on for the last 7, 8 years in our SELPA to help educators have more understanding for parents and how to be better listeners for parents. It's a continued work in progress, right? But we're working on that angle as well. So when it comes to working with school staff, we recognize that for many of you, you may feel that trust has been broken. Maybe somebody didn't respond to you in a timely manner, or maybe you didn't feel like somebody spoke to you with the compassion that you felt like you needed and that you deserved. And in those instances, it can be a little challenging to rebuild trust. Trust in relationships can take a hit. Even in the closest of relationships, trust can be damaged, and we all have to be willing to address it and talk through it. And it doesn't happen immediately. It does take time, and it happens through honesty and being willing to open up and being willing to be vulnerable. So we'll talk a little bit more about this. You'll see at the bottom of the slide that we've taken this information from a website called Cadre Works. And this is a federal think tank, a federal group of educators, of parents, of the most educated in the field when it comes to how to resolve conflict. And we get together about every 4 years in an amazing conference, and we talk about how do we move this work forward of being able to resolve conflict in a way that's healthy and productive and best for all involved. So you'll have access to the Cadre Works website. They have a whole section that's available for parents and so much great information. So much of the information in many of the following slides are taken directly from their website, and you can access it on your own. One of the things is they talk about it's so important for parents to participate. I'm going to make an assumption here, and that assumption is that you're here and participating in this, which tells me you're more likely to be the ones that are at the schools, volunteering in the classrooms, having conversations, meeting your child's teacher or teachers, meeting with the school administrators. That's my assumption, and I bet I'm right. But we have many parents who are very uninvolved and often don't come to IEP meetings. And that could be for a variety of reasons. It could be because the parent's at work and taking time off work could risk their job. Maybe it could be that a parent has had a very negative experience with the school in the past, maybe when they were growing up and going to school. And so it's a very daunting and kind of a scary experience for them that they just basically avoid. But anytime parents can be actively involved and participating, it's always going to benefit your child or your children. It's how we work together to solve problems. Communication is key, absolutely key. So talk with your school. If you're not able to be there in a meeting, communicate, let them know. Let them know what works for you. If meeting in the morning doesn't work, then they can try to accommodate and schedule meetings at a different time that works for you. If you had a bad experience with someone, don't keep it inside. Communicate it, talk about it. Maybe they didn't even realize that you had that experience, okay? So communication is going to be key. I'm just going to say that when we do communicate, and for any of us, educators at the SELPA, for parents at Family Focus, we need to be able to communicate respectfully. And we're seeing such a decline in society of respectful discourse in the way that we speak to each other. And I blame social media. I think that's the number one culprit. It's easy for people to hide behind an anonymous post and say really cutting, critical things. Is it building us up? Is it making us a better society? No, it's really not. So we need to be able to be respectful. And if you feel like you're not being respected by the educators, then communicate that. Communicate it. And if you need some help and assistance, you can reach out to your SELPA office. We don't have the contact information for all the SELPAs, but if you have a child receiving special education services, you should have received a copy of your parents' rights, and the information for your SELPA should be included in those parents' rights. But we're here to serve not only the school districts, we're here to help serve and to support parents as well. So all SELPAs are required by federal law to provide what's called and support the Community Advisory Committee. And maybe many of you are familiar with that term. You're participating in the Community Advisory Committee, otherwise known as the CAC. That's for parents, run by parents. That's another level of support that you can receive. But you can always reach out to the SELPA and talk to us. We're here to support you, to help educate you, to help advocate for you. Okay, so that's another level. All right, and I'm just gonna say, being a parent is a super hard job. I joke sometimes that if I knew how hard parenting would be, I might have thought twice about becoming one. So I love my children, but honestly, parenting is really hard. And I'm gonna say too that teaching is really hard. It's a really hard profession. And so we want to respect each other and respect the difficulties and the challenges that we're all facing. Okay. Anything you want to add, Monika?
Yeah, I just also want to add, I think when we are talking about teachers, and I don't know how many of you are familiar that there is a national teacher shortage, right? It's been an issue that every single district, I think, within the United States has really been struggling to find staff, qualified teachers, qualified staff to work in our school districts. I think after COVID, in the public sector, we've seen a pretty significant decrease. So I encourage you, if you have a passion for education, passion for working with students, take a look and see what programs. There are so many scholarships and opportunities available for people that really have a passion to teach, to actually go into the field. We again just are really hoping that we can build ourselves back up and we can support education and support each other in making sure that our kids get what's best, right?
And I'll say that our districts are doing a lot to try to address this. Monika and I did a training a few months ago that was all new teachers that had been brought in, hired from out of the country. Individuals who were willing to accept the positions because nobody here in the country was applying. And so the districts are getting creative, but it's not just teachers there's a shortage of. All teachers' assistants, every single district is having challenges hiring and filling positions as well. And it's not just happening in education, it's happening in other sectors as well, in human services and really across the board.
And I think similarly with Regional Center and with Family Focus, they're all experiencing the same thing. So again, if you have a passion for education, or if you know someone that does, we encourage you to take a look and kind of join us in supporting our students.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to say that trust is at the heart of everything, right? Trust and learning from each other. And that takes a little bit of patience. And it also takes some forgiveness, because do school districts make mistakes? Absolutely. Everybody's human. Do parents sometimes make mistakes? Absolutely. We're all human, right? At the SELPA, we're a little perfect, but other than that, just kidding. But really, whatever we can do to build positive relationships and be part of that is the most important movement we have in today's world, I think. Sometimes you may feel like in a meeting, that the information is coming along way too fast and furious, and it's hard to keep up with what's being said, or really you need a lot clarified for you because educators speak in their own language of acronyms, and we forget because we're so comfortable speaking that way. So we just wanted to provide you with some sample language where you could ask for the rest of the team, the school staff, to slow down. You need to feel comfortable. You have every right to ask them to do that. And really, we're teaching our schools that an IEP meeting that doesn't have what we call a shared understanding, where everybody understands what's being recommended and proposed and offered, is not a successful meeting. So here's some language that you can use to ask some of those questions. Hey, can you tell me more about? Or that term's unfamiliar to me. Can you please explain it for me? Okay. I've been in IEP meetings where I needed the rest of the team, the school staff portion of the team, to explain to me some of the acronyms that they were talking about or some of the curriculum that they were referencing. You could ask, how am I going to know that this program that you're recommending is working? Those goals can sometimes be very confusing when they get presented. And really, what the goal is saying is, how am I going to know that this IEP is working for my child? How am I going to know that they're able to meet this goal? Okay. What is the school proposing to do about? And then you could talk about the specific concerns that you have. Or how was the progress you mentioned measured? How do you know that my child is now able to do this? What was it that you took a look at to say that my child has mastered this or has partially mastered this? What are some of the other options that could be considered? Okay. And then could you please share the data with me that supports what you're proposing? And you may come up with all kinds of other questions, but don't hesitate to ask the questions. As educators, the educators must take the time. They need to take the time to ensure that you have a clear understanding of what's being proposed and what's being offered. Anything else, Monika, you want to add to that? Okay. So with that, we want to talk a little bit about what we are doing here in the Antelope Valley SELPA. This is going to look a little bit different if you have students being educated in the Santa Clarita Valley area or within the region of LAUSD. I will say LAUSD is considered a single district SELPA. So they're a district and a SELPA at the same time, where we support 10 different school districts. Santa Clarita Valley supports, I'm not even sure how many school districts, but LAUSD is obviously so big that their own single district SELPA. And it's going to look just a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. What maybe we can also just briefly describe what is a SELPA. So you might not even know what that is. And so a SELPA really is, there are SELPAs throughout the whole entire state of California. And it's an acronym, surprise, surprise, and it stands for Special Education Local Plan Area.
And you can see that on our logo.
Right. And what the SELPAs typically do is they're kind of like the liaison between the districts and the state, right? And so funding, policies, any changes related to special education, we really handle. And so we'll have a local area that the SELPA will work with. And so for us in the Antelope Valley, we have 10 school districts that we work with. And it's such a vast, wide area. And so Acton Agua Dulce is one of our districts. Gorman, Gylys, those are our small. Gorman and Hughes Lake Elizabeth are our smaller districts, but then we have Eastside Union School District. We have Lancaster School District. We have the Antelope Valley Union High School District, which is all the high schools within the Antelope Valley. We have Palmdale School District. We have Westside Union School District, which is in Quartz Hill, and we have Keppel School District. Am I forgetting anyone? Oh, Wilsona and Lake Los Angeles. So as you see, we have a very diverse and wide geographic area that our SELPA works with. And it's very similar throughout the entire state. But for LA, because LA is such a big area and there's so many schools, they operate under their own, they have their own SELPA.
So, and each SELPA is going to have a little bit of a different process when it comes to what's called alternative dispute resolution. This process of alternative dispute resolution is so important in the state of California that the state has been providing grant funding, and we wish the funding was a little bit more than it is, but for many years now, we've been receiving a small amount of funding in order to help grow alternative dispute processes within our particular SELPA. Other business entities have dispute resolution processes as well. So large companies, corporations, include and embed some of these processes in their human resource departments. Hospitals, major healthcare industries have what's called ombudsman. And ombud services are really similar in that they're there to help to negotiate, to mediate, to help bring about resolution in a peaceful manner. So this is really a process that's moving forward across really most industries. And the reason why it's important is that sometimes even with your very best efforts as parents, and even with the very best efforts of schools, conflict still exists. And maybe the skill sets aren't in place, or maybe sometimes just a neutral party needs to be brought in to help bring about a peaceful resolution. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what we're doing here in the Antelope Valley SELPA. And if your child is being educated in another SELPA, we encourage you to follow up with that SELPA and find out what are the alternative dispute resolution practices they have in place. They're most likely available on their website, okay? So this is a less formal process than a due process hearing. So a due process hearing is in the back of your parents' rights. There's information about if you want to file a state complaint or you want to file for what's called due process. Basically what you're doing is filing a lawsuit, okay? And that is absolutely your right as a parent. We will, towards the end of the presentation, talk about why there are some pretty serious things to consider before you move forward to a lawsuit, why we think it's not in the child's best interest in many cases, and why there are some things that you give up. And it's not just our opinion, this is the opinion of national experts, okay? So you can speak to a district representative. If you're not able to find the information on their website, you can speak to a district representative and find out a little bit more about the ADR practices. And ADR stands for the Alternative Dispute Resolution. So here you see a continuum of the services that we provide here within our SELPA. So you heard Monika mention that we've been teaching staff for the last 7-8 years. I think we're about ready to start next school year, our 9th year, how to operate facilitated IEP meetings. And I'm going to go into a little bit more description about what that means. But I just want to kind of do an overview of this pyramid. So basically, we have an individual who is running the meeting, and just like Monika said, ensuring that every team member feels valued, feels heard, is actively participating in the discussion, and that discussion is an efficient process and focused squarely on the student. We're not allowing outside conversations to come in that are not directly related to that child's needs, okay? Sometimes parents may feel, or the school district may feel, that somebody who's neutral, that doesn't know the student, who's not working for the district, can come in and facilitate that IEP meeting. We have a network of facilitators where maybe it's a facilitator who comes from another district, has basically no skin in the game, as we say it, who isn't tied to have a relationship with the district administrators or with the family or with the student. They're just neutral. Sometimes it's the SELPA. Monika and I will come in and we'll facilitate the meeting. So we also have a process for what's called voluntary mediation. In that process, that's not an IEP meeting, but a trained mediator, and we have a network of trained mediators within our SELPA, and I happen to be one of them, will actually conduct a formal mediation process where I'll sit down with the parent, or another mediator will sit down with the parent, as well as the representative from the school district, and help to guide a conversation that can bring about resolution. Okay. Sometimes when there's too intensive feelings going on, a mediator may meet in what's called a caucus, meaning meet separately with the parent. And then with the parent's permission, go back and have the conversation and share what the parent wants and what the parent's concerns are. And then do the same thing from the district. And at a certain point, we're able to negotiate and get to a place where both parties are willing to reach an agreement. Okay, that's a voluntary process. Sometimes it's not another district mediator. Maybe it's not the SELPA mediator. Maybe it's an outside mediator who's contracted by the district and comes in. Okay, so we've got a range of options. We always offer, throughout the process of facilitated meetings, neutrally facilitated meetings, and throughout the process of mediation, you can see on the side of the pyramid, we can offer what's called conflict coaching. Not everybody is comfortable dealing with conflict. In fact, most people kind of shut down and don't want to deal with conflict. But that doesn't help to bring about meaningful and useful results. So conflict coaching, and I'm a trained conflict coach, conflict coaching is where we sit down with the individual and either in one session or in a series of sessions are able to help, and again, a voluntary process, able to help walk with that individual through that conflict that they're experiencing and help them to identify maybe an even broader perspective in how they want to approach the conflict given their ideal situation. So it's really having a personal coach kind of guide you through it. That can be really helpful, even before going into an IEP meeting, that you see things very differently than the school staff. Okay, so that's an option. Another option you see here is the collaborative conference. In the collaborative conference, this is where a parent and school district is willing to sit down together, and they're not going to be addressing issues that must be heard by the entire IEP team, but sometimes there's a lot of things going on that the entire team does not have to be a part of. And in a collaborative conference, a neutral facilitator such as myself can be there and help guide that conversation together. It's different than a mediation, but there are some similarities. But it's where you and the school site or the school district can reach some agreements and get those settled and out of the way. Okay? Parents always have the right, always, to file a state complaint. Does that build relationship? No, not necessarily. But in some circumstances, a state complaint and filing a state complaint may be appropriate. If you file for a due process hearing, the law requires that you go through a resolution meeting where you sit down with a mediator and try to come to an agreement with the school district. The only way you can bypass a resolution meeting is both the parent and the school district agree to bypass that particular meeting. But ultimately, we're looking at a due process hearing, and that's where an administrative law judge comes in and hears information from both sides, and this can take a very long time. And you have to get an attorney, and the district has to have an attorney. And this can really drag out the process. And then an administrative hearing officer or this hearing judge makes the final decision. In my experience, sometimes decisions are made that aren't even what the parent wants. Sometimes attorneys are recommending things that as a parent you may not even want. Sometimes a hearing officer makes a determination of what that student will be provided with, and they're not educators, right? So there's some risks and complexities there. Anytime we can help to get agreement, even if it's partial agreement on certain parts of the IEP, and we'll work out and hash out the rest of it later, it's always going to be in the best interest of the student. Okay? Anything, Monika, that you want to add to that?
No, I think the next couple slides we're going to just go over a little bit more in depth, but no, I think that's very
Great.
comprehensive.
And really the next following slides are really for your information. So when you receive a copy of these slides that Diana's going to send out to you, you'll have more information and you'll know what this looks like. This information can be found on our website as well. So here again, this is just a little bit more information about the facilitated process. Okay, so you'll have that information. What it doesn't show you here is that the facilitated process here in our SELPA we follow the model developed by a company called Key to Ed. And if you want to, you can even look up information on their website. But this is where we want a visual group memory that's available where everybody on the team can see the discussion as it's written down and documented, and we keep track of visually all the agreements that the team has reached. First thing, it's really motivating when you can see that, you know what, okay, we don't see everything eye to eye, but we are able to reach some agreements here. It's motivating, okay? I don't know about you, but for me, it's hard to keep all the information upstairs in my brain, especially the older I get. Okay, but this way, having that visual group memory, you can refer back and see what's been happening in the conversation. And that's so much more meaningful to people. Okay. When I facilitate a meeting, I'm going to make sure I'm constantly encouraging the team to clarify for each other, for parents to clarify, for school staff to clarify, so that we're able to reach that shared understanding that I referenced earlier. Okay. Here in neutral facilitation, just like I described, it's somebody who's neutral, who doesn't work with the student, doesn't work for the district, doesn't work and is not familiar with the situation, but they're brought in to come in and help guide the team to be productive and able to reach consensus, which is the definition. Can we live with it? Can we support it? And can this actually be implemented? Sometimes we come up with stuff, but it's not reasonable. It's not doable, right? So the facilitator is there to make sure, okay, are we all going to support this? And is it actually doable? Is it reasonable? Okay. All right. Here again, the voluntary mediation. Okay. And this is at no cost. I want to be very clear about that. These alternative dispute resolution options have zero cost to the families and actually for the districts, because we want to encourage the use of these practices. Okay. The conflict coaching gives you a little bit more information, and the collaborative conference. So you'll have all of this information as I've described it to you. Okay. Monika, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of wrap things up, and then maybe we'll have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. Does that sound good?
Yeah, so if we see here, this is just a again, it's when there's conflict, which conflict is good, it gives us an opportunity to really talk about, work together to come up with a solution. But when there is unresolved conflict, it really affects, there are so many different areas that it affects. So there's the financial cost, right? So we have all the attorney fees and the time. We have all of the educational costs. So it's all this time and energy away from instruction. And as I said, you know, we're dealing with a shortage of staff. So it's taken away from the educational time. There's a big emotional cost to all of this. There's burnout and stress on parent side and on staff side. There's quite a big emotional cost associated with any sort of conflict that can't be resolved. And then the other really big thing is the relationship is very challenged. It's very damaged afterwards. There's a lot of broken trust. So it behooves us as educators to do everything to work collaboratively with families. And we are really encouraging our families to work collaboratively with our school staff. And then there's that whole societal cost. So families and schools are divided, and there are a lot of missed opportunities for growth and for us to just make education better for everyone. So I want us to just all be very, kind of take a look at some of the other pitfalls of not being able to resolve the conflict. And so we're just gonna wrap this all up like a nice little baby burrito here. And we're gonna go over some key points and some takeaways, and then we're gonna open it up for questions. So some things that we want to just point out before we leave is, again, we talked about IDEA, and that's the federal law, which governs the provision of special education. So that whole process that we talked about in the beginning about IDEA, least restrictive environment, free and appropriate education, those are all a part of the federal law, okay? And again, the IDEA requires districts to provide special education services in the least restrictive environment. And again, it comes from federal law, state law upholds this. All of our districts have to uphold this. The IEP team must meet at least annually. And to go over how they've made progress on the goals. And then the students reassessed every 3 years to determine eligibility. Does the student still require special education services? The next point is that parents might request a meeting at any time, and the district has 30 days to hold the meeting. And that's an IEP meeting, but not all meetings need to be IEP meetings. We can resolve a lot of questions and maybe some issues just by having a conversation with the psychologist, with the case carrier, the teacher, or the administrator. Okay. And then if we continue on, so we want you to figure out and organize your child's IEP. Okay, figure out a way where you're going to keep tabs on everything that's happening in the IEP. I know that Family Focus used to do workshops, and Regional Center, I think, may also do the workshops where you have this IEP binder where you can organize all the IEP, all of the IEP documents, anything that you need to bring with you to an IEP meeting. And having these binders really helps our parents find the needed information when you're at the meeting. It also helps you track progress, and it can also really help you participate effectively. So if you're at an IEP meeting and you're like, oh, I remember like a couple of years ago we did this and this really worked well. You know, we're hoping that all of our teams have really good communication, but sometimes from kindergarten through 7th grade, so much has changed as far as staff that it's really great for you to be the person that can kind of glue all that together. We also want you to take away that working collaboratively leads to better decisions for students. Ultimately, it's what's best for our kids. And conflict is okay. It's sometimes a part of the process. It is okay. And team members have different perspectives and different points of views, and we all come together and hopefully we can share our different perspectives and come up with a solution. Okay, and it can bring some positive results. And then lastly, Stacy went over all the different alternative methods that we can address the different disputes, right? And it can be faster and help to maintain positive relationships. And at our SELPA, we are here to help our families. We are here to help our community, and we are here to help our districts. So we're there to support anyone in their journey with special education. We're really hoping that we can facilitate some really good relationships. And if you do have conflict and you do need support, contact us. Let us know. Let's see how we can help you come to some mutual agreement and help you and your student really have a positive experience with an education. Anything else,
Should
Stacy?
be more vocal about it, like once they're finished with maybe trauma service.
So we want to thank you all for your participation. If you need any more information, you can call us at the SELPA. Here's our phone number. You can ask for Stacy or for myself. And again, we're going to be sharing this PowerPoint with you so that you can review the information. And if right now, if you don't have any questions, it's okay. You can always contact us at another time if you have any questions or need any clarification. But at this point, maybe we'll open it up to questions if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Monica. And let me go ahead and pause the recording.